A caller took me to task saying that my mantra over the previous months has been very much HSE and government-led. He's entitled to his opinion, but he did suggest that I should talk to Dr. Marcus de Brun on the matter to get a more balanced approach, or at least the other side. And we put a call into Marcus and he joins me by phone. Marcus, good morning. We're livid over what went on in nursing homes, isn't that right?
Yes, I am very upset about the way that the nursing home residents in Ireland were treated. We've had somewhere between the region of 800 and 1,000 deaths, depending on who you can believe. But certainly a large proportion of those, in my opinion, were down to neglect and very, very faulty guidelines and the absence of being able to provide basic things during the height of the crisis, like testing or having hospital patients dumped essentially into the nursing homes without being tested and that sort of thing. So yes, there was a catastrophe in the nursing home sector, and I think the blame for that is fair and square at the government's feet. And interestingly, Micheál Martin said on Ryan Tubridy on the Late Late Show about 2 weeks ago that there would be no public inquiry, which to me is an absolute mystery. We were certainly well aware, government and those responsible for guidelines were certainly well aware that the elderly people were the most, potentially most vulnerable group, and that didn't hit anybody by surprise. But even we've 650,000 people in Ireland over the age of 65, but of that group, of the 650,000, those with illnesses, the very most vulnerable group, which we also knew right from the outset, are those with underlying medical conditions. Yeah. Well, they're in the nursing home sector, and we have 25,000 people in the nursing home sector. So even testing was pulled out of the nursing home sector to preserve it for the general public, for people who are at relatively zero or low risk, in order for the kind of public relations job that the government was doing not to run out of tests. They pulled the tests away from the nursing home sector, the very most vulnerable group, and I have a memo from the HSE, instructing us to do that. It's up on my Twitter page, so these are facts. I'm not making anything up,
I spoke in early days with staff in nursing homes and owners of nursing homes who were borrowing and stealing masks from painters and decorators back in the early days. It was horrendous. Could you walk through the figure, okay? Because we've been given a statistic and it's updated regularly of 1,746 total deaths. And then somebody somewhere did research into RIP.ie. And then what was found that we were counting all deaths. I read somewhere the weekend said that seasonally we had 1,200 more deaths than we would have had any other year.
Of Radgar has essentially admitted or asserted that yes, that there was a huge or a large number of people who died with COVID as opposed to from COVID were included in the numbers. But I think, the most important thing really...
but that is important. That means that it's not 1,746. It's more likely to be somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200, right?
You have to look at COVID. Go back to exactly what the CSO, and they're completely reliable, what the CSO has said. It's not deaths per million. It's deaths per number of over 65-year-olds in your population. That is the reason that death per million is being used, is really to kind of tarnish the Swedish approach, because in my opinion, they have it completely right. Now, if you look at Swedish deaths, the total death in Sweden is in the region of 5,400 people. If we take our statistic as true, we've got 1,700 deaths. Now, Sweden has got 2 million over 65-year-olds. We've got 650,000 over 65-year-olds. So Sweden has 3 times the number of over 65 people, and it's got 3 times the number of deaths. So, and it's the same in the UK. We think we're doing a lot better than the UK. Well, the UK has got 12 million over 65-year-olds. They've got roughly 22 times the number of at-risk, and they've got 22 times the number of deaths. Yeah. So this deaths per million kind of statistic that's frequently thrown out there is an absolutely ludicrous analogy, or a ludicrous kind of piece of information, and it's being used used very, very dangerously, because we're being herded down a road. If we take the Swedish approach, Sweden are not wearing masks. They haven't shut down their economy to the extent that we have. I mean, we're highly dependent on tourism and small pubs and small businesses. All of these people, all of those families, they've all been shut down. And, the argument there, certainly from the Swedish approach, is that the vast majority of what's going on here is entirely unnecessary. And the facts and figures, this deaths per million thing and this kind of Sweden bashing, all of that stuff is being used to kind of push us down a certain road. And there is a very solid argument out there to say that none of this is necessary, but yet the mainstream media, RTE, nobody is picking this argument up and asking just simply, I'm not wearing a tinfoil hat. I'm just saying, let's ask the question here, is all of this necessary? We've all assumed that it absolutely is, and we're being fed statistics like deaths per million and everything.
So if it's not necessary, what's the option?
Well, the option is to look at the Swedish approach, is to absolutely look at the Swedish approach, which is a soft touch approach, which is essentially to protect the vulnerable. But the governmental fear is that we're locked into a road where we can't revise, because if there's any degree of revision to what's going on, that's going to call into question, well, if we're revising it, we must have got something wrong. And remember, huge mistakes have happened. A huge number of people died in nursing homes. There's been 100,000. There's been over in the region of 100,000 cervical cancer smear tests cancelled, breast checks cancelled, all because of this road that we're on. And, every year, 5% of those tests are abnormal. That's the general kind of figure. So at the minute, there's 5,000 women walking around in Ireland with undiagnosed.
But Micheál Martin has said, I know that there will be chaos with regards to, and there probably is chaos already in regards to waiting lists and people who are looking for testing in various aspects. But he has said that, he told me actually that we won't go into a second lockdown if this comes back, and maybe it's inevitable it will in the winter, because we've learned an awful lot from the first time around. I'm kind of paraphrasing, that we will just then at that stage mind the most precious, the elderly and the immunosuppressed.
Yes, well, it's very, politicians are great at kicking the can down the road, and kind of, saying, well, what we're going to do a great job in the future. If that's the case, if there's any semblance of truth, why not do that now? The reason that he's not doing that now, the reason that politicians are not doing that now is because any degree of revision into what's actually going on in terms of the reality of COVID-19, any degree of revision is going to come with the implicit suggestion that mistakes were made. And that is intolerable because of the huge number of deaths and the political consequences of those deaths. Because if we lived in a country that had any degree of openness or transparency, there would be some level of accountability or some level of investigation. If 2 or 3 people died in Ireland because of government incompetence in any other given reality, we would be having a national inquiry. But when we're up into several hundreds of deaths, and Micheál Martin said categorically, those people who have died, they're not even going to be granted the dignity of an inquiry. Now, this is all very, very strange. People really have to start asking questions. RTE is not asking the questions. Mainstream media are not asking the questions. And we have to start asking them ourselves and asking why isn't there a dialogue? Why isn't there a debate? Why aren't we looking at these figures? Okay. We've got somewhere in the region of 800 to 1,000 people who have died, and those people are not even going to get the benefit of a public inquiry. That to me is telling in itself.
Okay, my friend, it's good to catch up with you. Thank you so much for taking the call this morning.
It's refreshing to be able to speak to someone who's willing to have a bit of an open mind on things.
That's what we're here for. Take care, Marcus. Appreciate you taking the call.
Thank you, Neil.
Cheers.
Take
Lines
care.
open on that.
Call the Neil Prendeville Show now. 1850 104 106.